All right, so your quiz 12 study guide. Let's see, simplify the number using the imaginary unit. All right, problems 1 through 4. Square root negative 64. That's equal to the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 64. Square root of negative 1 is equal to I. Square root of 64 is equal to 8. So this simplifies to 8I. Number 2, square root of negative 49. That's the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 49. The square root of negative 1 is equal to I. And the square root of 49 is equal to 7. So this simplifies to 7I. Number 3 is the square root of negative 45, which is the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 9 times the square root of 5. Because 9 times 5 equals 45. So then we simplify the square root of negative 1 as I. The square root of 9 is equal to 3. And the square root of 5 is in simplest form. So when we finish this up, we go real, imaginary, and then radical. There's your simplest form. And number 4, square root negative 252. That's the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 252. The square root of negative 1 is equal to I. Now, the square root of 252, you're trying to find the largest perfect square that goes into it evenly. And 252 divided by 16 doesn't go evenly. 252 divided by 36 goes 7 times. So this 252 becomes the square root of 36 times the square root of 7. The square root of 36 is equal to 6. So the real part, the imaginary part, and the radical. There's your simplest form. Or there's, your simplest form using the imaginary unit. All right, then we've got a problem that says identify the graph. We're going to graph negative 2 plus 3i. Remember these graphs. There was a real portion and there was a imaginary portion. Horizontal is the real, vertical was the imaginary. So negative 2, positive 3i. Right there is negative 2 plus 3i. All right, that was number 5, right? All right, 6, 7, and 8. What is the absolute value of each number? So number 6, we're looking for the absolute value of 3 minus 5i. That's going to be equal to the square root of 3 squared plus the negative 5 squared, which would be the square root of 3 squared is 9, and negative 5 squared is 25. And 9 plus 25 equals 34. Square root of 34 is in simplest form. There are no perfect squares that go into 34 evenly. Number 7, negative 2 plus 4i. Again, they're asking for the absolute value. That's going to be equal to the square root of the negative 2 squared plus 4 squared. Which is the square root of negative 2 squared is 4, and 4 squared is 16. So be careful here. We get the square root of 20. The square root of 20 has a perfect square in it. The square root of 20 is equal to the square root of 4 times the square root of 5. The square root of 4 is equal to 2. So in its simplest form, we get 2 radical 5. Yeah. Because you're squaring this value. And you're squaring this value. You're doing a shortened version of the distance formula from that point on the graph to the origin. So we're only concerned with that value and the 4. Yeah. No, it doesn't. It just helps it stay clear in my mind when I do it. All right, number 8. Five plus 2i. Absolute value of 5 plus 2i. So that's going to be the square root of 5 squared plus 2 squared. That's the square root of 25 plus 4. And that's the square root of 29. There are no perfect squares that go into 29 evenly. So you're finished. Simplify each expression, 9 through 14. So we're going to be adding, subtracting, and multiplying complex numbers. So number 9, we got 4 minus I plus negative 2 minus I. So we take the 4 plus the negative 2. And 4 plus negative 2 equals 2. And then we take the imaginary parts. Now look, you got negative I plus negative I. That's negative 1i plus negative 1i. That's negative 2i. Got that? And number 10, 2 minus 5i. Be careful, this is subtraction. 4 plus 5i. Look what you got here. You got 2 minus 4. 2 minus 4. That's negative 2. you have negative 5i minus 5i. That's negative 5i minus 5i. That's negative 10i. You can type it in your calculator if you need to. 5 negative minus 5. You get negative 10. Number 11, multiplication. Negative 7i times I. Negative 7i times I. That is negative 7i squared. Remember, we said yesterday that I squared is equal to negative 1. So this is negative 7 times negative 1. And negative 7 times negative 1 is positive 7. Number 12, 3 minus 5i times 5 minus 6i. We got to do the distributive property twice. We got to multiply the 3 times the 5 is 15. And 3 times negative 6i is negative 18i. Yep. You do that when you got parentheses next to parentheses, and when you have two terms in each set of parentheses. Now you got a negative 5i times a 5. That's negative 25i. And a negative 5i times a negative 6i. That's positive 30i squared. So we get 15. You got a negative 18 minus 25. That's negative 43i. And then it's plus a 30 times a negative 1. That 30 times negative 1 is negative 30. So now you combine your 15 and your negative 30, and that gives you negative 15. And you bring down your negative 43i. Number 13 is 5 plus 3i. And we're multiplying it by negative 1 minus 2i. Same procedure. 5 times negative 1 is negative 5. 5 times negative 2i is negative 10i. 3i times negative 1 is negative 3i. 3i times negative 2i, negative 6i squared. Negative 5 comes down. Negative 10 minus 3i is negative 13i. We're minus 6, and the I squared is negative 1. So you got to be careful here, all right? You got a minus 6 times a negative 1. So you're going to end up with the 6 times the negative 1 is negative 6. So what you've got is this -5 minus -6. Okay? -5 minus the -6. This is gone. We replaced it with the -6. So in your calculator, if you go 5 negative minus 6 negative and hit equals, you get +1. Because you keep, change, change. You're effectively taking -5 and adding 6 to it, you get a +1. The minus 13i just falls down. You got to be real careful right there. When you're subtracting 6i squared. All right, and then number 14. -1 minus I times -5 minus 6i. Here we go. -1 times -5, that's +5. -1 times -6i, that's +6i. -I times -5 is +5i. And -I times -6i is +6i squared. We get 5. We got a +6i and a +5i is a +11i, plus a 6 times the I squared, which is -1. So this 6 times the -1 is -6, and that goes away. So we get 5 plus -6, or 5 minus 6, -1, plus 11i. That concludes your Quiz 12 study guide. Any questions?